A reading from the 6th chapter of the book of Luke. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Jesus came down with them and stood on a level place with a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea, Jerusalem, and the coast of Tyre and Sidon. They had come to hear him and be healed of their diseases, and those who were troubled with unclean spirits were cured. And all in the crowd were trying to touch him, for power came out from him and healed all of them. Then he looked up at his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you, revile you, and defame you on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for surely your reward is great in heaven, for that is what their ancestors did to the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that is what their ancestors did to the false prophets." The Gospel of the Lord. Well, as a graduate of Benson Tech High School, it's very encouraging to see young engineers at work. Because they are building not just our future, but our present. And they bring to that task a optimism and a joy and an enthusiasm which sadly some of us struggle to maintain these days. And in fact, I'm remembering, if I remember correctly, that one of my vice principals at Benson used to be a member here, Mr. Blair, if I remember correctly. So I'm going to call it Engineering Sunday. I did not go into engineering, obviously, but I'm grateful for all of what that gave me in terms of understanding life and occasionally being able to fix something around the house. That's part of our story, isn't it? The children who are the engineers of our future as well as our present. Part of our story is the connections that we share with each other, sometimes in surprising ways. This is on the heels of Super Bowl Sunday. This is now Oscar season. And some of us are hard into Oscar movie madness, where we race around and try to hit as many Best Picture nominations as we can between now and the Academy Awards ceremony on March 2nd, I believe. These people are telling stories in all of these movies. Now we understand that it's about the money, but at the root, at the core, at the heart of the work that these people are doing, whose work we appreciate on the screen, is a drive to tell a story, to capture something of who we are and what we're about. Sometimes in everyday ways, sometimes in outlandish ways, but at the heart of it, something about our story, who we are and where we're going. Sometimes called narrative, story is a way to place ourselves in life and in the world, to understand who we might be, who we are and who we might be. This year's nominees, in case you are not participating in Oscar Movie Madness, offer narratives covering the story of rags to riches and back again, the yearning for an authentic life, the religious quest for power, economic inequality and oppression on a galactic scale, and perennial challenges of aging and identity. One way or another, these are our stories. These are human stories. They offer glimpses of how we are in the world and how we might be. As alarming events unfold in the nation and around the world, some of us are freshly aware that we can't change the world, but we can choose how we live in it. As leadership coach Margaret Markuson observes, it's a matter of shifting from attempting the impossible to change others, to change the world, to the merely difficult, changing ourselves. We may not be able to choose the world that we live in or change it, but we can manage how we live in the world. This morning's lectionary readings also tell a story, a narrative, something about God's story unfolding in the world. The prophet Jeremiah is sometimes called the weeping prophet because he experienced the tragedy of the world at his time so profoundly. He was, in a way, caught in a very tight place between God's call to preach difficult words and the situation that he encountered. Jeremiah's call, as some of you might know in the first chapter, can be read almost as a lament. He says, before I was born, when I was still in the womb, you called me. You put me up to this. You put me in this terrible position. And the rest of his life, more or less, confirms that. He tells the story of political collapse and cultural destruction, spiritual ruin through military defeat and exile, and then he also moves on to the hope and renewal and restoration, as we caught in a glimpse of his poetry this morning. His pronouncements spell out the people's errors, remind them of God's love and justice, and steer them back toward hope, toward life as a tree planted by streams of waters. As Jim pointed out, this morning's passage is poetry. It reads like wisdom literature, a kind of meant to lift up the veil and provide a glimpse of God's way of structuring things, which is often at odds with the normal way of our normal expectations. It's written in general they terms, third person, but everyone knows it's about us, it's about me, it's about all of us as human beings. It doesn't say that God curses or blesses. It's a story about the status of things, how things work. This is what blessing looks like, and this is what cursing looks like. So if you're blessed, according to the poem, you trust in the Lord. You're like a tree planted by water. Your roots go into the stream. You're not afraid of the heat. Your leaves stay green. You're not anxious in drought, and you always bear fruit. Because you delight in God's way, you experience peace. The cursed, on the other hand, he says, trust in mere mortals. They look for strength in mere flesh. The hearts are turned away from God. They're like a shrub in the desert, blind to relief when it comes, and living in parched places like an uninhabited salt land. Bleak indeed. Those who are cursed are the ones who follow the advice of the wicked, and they are blown away like chaff and don't recognize God's presence right among them. To be God's people in the world, to be planted by streams of water, is not necessarily going to change everything, but it does open up the possibility of having a different story to tell for us. Hundreds of years later, Jesus arrives on the scene, and the people are again under the thumb of oppressive occupation. Their lives are not their own. Their taxes, their travel, their religious observances, their required military participation are all forced upon them by the Roman Empire. Against the backdrop of the Roman Empire, Jesus' words are a stinging rebuke. There's another kingdom at work here, Jesus proclaims, a different story to be told than the one that you're hearing from the Roman Empire. In the world where God rules, things are different. Now, when we remember the Beatitudes, as they're called, the Blesseds, we often think of Matthew's more poetic version. As Diana Butler Bass points out, Luke is blunter. There's no rhapsodic rhythm in his words. Indeed, Jesus delivers the truth straight up, she says, like a good Scotch. Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. She continues, in Luke's account, Jesus isn't on a hill. It's not a sermon on the mount. He has come down from the mountain and is in a level place, as the text tells us. New Testament scholars call it the Sermon on the Plain, in contrast to Matthew's Sermon on the Mount. The stage is flat in Luke's version. Any sense of hierarchy, that up and down of human social structure, is gone. All the characters are standing equally with Jesus. We don't soar in this version of the Beatitudes. We look at Jesus face to face. Blessed are you who are miserable now, because the kingdom is with you. Blessed, blessed, blessed are the poor. You live under this Roman kingdom, but yours is the kingdom of God. Those of you who are hungry will be filled. Those of you who weep will laugh. Blessed are you who face such oppression, because being here right now, you're entitled to something far better, far deeper, far certain, far more holy. In such a context, the hate you experience is evidence of the decay of the world passing away, slowly but surely, and a new world taking shape. And in the meantime, woe. Woe to those who seem to have it all together. Woe to those who seem to wield all the power. Woe to those who are rich without caring for others. Woe for those who are laughing at the expense of others. Jesus' underlying message seems to be that while they can't necessarily change the world that they live in, they can choose how to be in it. They can choose which story is theirs. Even more than that, it's an affirmation that the world's very infrastructure is changing before their eyes, and they're part of it. So what's our story? What's Rose City Park's story? What's the Presbyterian Church's story? What's the nation's story? What story are we living? Some years ago, a church consultant team at Manuka Retreat and Conference Center offered a preliminary assessment of the center and its program. One of the things they said is that retreat centers in general, sitting a little outside of the regular circle of church life, had the capacity to serve as a forward point, opening up people's hearts and souls to imagine new possibilities and see things with fresh perspective. And any of you who has spent time at Manuka or at any other camp or at any other kind of conference or even on vacation know what they're talking about. From that outside perspective, you can see things, you can feel things, you can notice things that you might but that you might not otherwise. In the same way, a congregation like Rose City Park can be and is a forward point, opening up hearts and souls to imagine new possibilities, to build new structures together, and to see things with fresh perspective. We're still managing ourselves, yet in the process, the world changes just a bit. We can live cursed, and we can live blessed. While we can't change everything, we can choose which story we're going to tell. Now, as it was mentioned, tomorrow is President's Day. It's not necessary for the church to attend to national holidays, but occasionally it seems good to make a connection or two. President's Day, as you might know, originated by an act of Congress in 1885 in recognition of Washington's birthday, which is actually February 12th. But to give federal employees a 3-day weekend in 1968, the Uniform Monday Holiday Act moved it to the third Monday in February. And the holiday has since become a day to celebrate all U.S. presidents, past and present, especially Abraham Lincoln, whose birthday is also in February. In a poignant scene in the musical Hamilton, George Washington summons Alexander Hamilton to help him write a speech. Not to campaign, as Hamilton hopes, for yet another term as the nation's first president, but to step down. Recognizing the danger of locating too much power in the newly established office of the president, he intends to step away. In the song they sing together, he says he wants to teach them how to say goodbye. That's how power is to work in our system. That's the story that we tell. And in Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, at the close of the Civil War and just 41 days before his assassination, he closes that address with these familiar words: "With malice toward none and with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for the one who shall have borne the battle and for their widow and orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations." That's part of our story, the story we tell, the story that flies in the face of empire. And then we will be like trees planted by running water. Amen.